mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal, you know?
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.
Well, hello and welcome to another of our Nature Talks episode. It's a very long time we have not had episodes, but this time we are up for something very unique, and very unique indeed. We are speaking about the world's most trafficked animal, pangolins. Of course, they are world famous for the most disheartening time of their decline and extinction, almost heading towards extinction. But they're also known to us for their cuteness and armory bodies. So here with me is Kelsey from Pangolin Conservation Research Center. Is that true? Did I say it right?
Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation.
Well, that's wonderful, man. So PCRF is a short form of that. And
Yes.
so that's great. So if you are ready, we can. I would like to first ask you to introduce yourself. Why are you here?
Yeah, so I'm the founder and executive director of the Pangolin Conservation and Research Foundation. Also the secretariat of the Namibian Pangolin Working Group. And I'm also on the IUCN Pangolin Specialist Group as the co-chair for Southern Africa.
That's wonderful, of course, to hear. And Kelsey, of course, according to as far as I know, I believe pangolins are not that much known to us. I mean, we don't know much about pangolins. So what was it that got you interested in working with these unique creatures?
Well, that's actually funny you ask, because that's the main reason why I started working with pangolins. I was working on my master's thesis and I was leaning towards carnivores because that's my background. But I came across pangolins and the fact that they're the most trafficked mammal in the world, and decided, it's actually shocking there's such little research and such little being done to help them. So I decided, even if I move on after 2 years of my master's thesis, at least my thesis will be helping conserve a species, because I wasn't doing it as much for the paper, but to make a difference in conservation. And here I am now with my own nonprofit organization, because there's just not enough being done to help them and to learn about them.
I do very much agree, because I also went through your website. It's absolutely amazing. And of course, pangolins themselves are very, least understood creatures. I mean, I was working on an art exhibition a few months back, and with the students in that particular school, we made a near life-size African pangolin. And people who visit the art exhibition, all these children who visit the art exhibition, they had no idea what this creature was, and it's pretty disheartening, because even if it goes extinct, people will not know it is gone, because many of them don't know what this creature actually is. So of course we reach to one of the key questions here. Kelsey, why do you think pangolins are important to the ecosystem?
Well, they're very important for many different reasons. First of all, they've actually been around in ecosystems for nearly 80 million years. The first fossil records date back that far. And they've always done quite all right until people came along. And they're very important because they keep an ecosystem in balance. They almost act as a natural pest control. One pangolin can consume up to 7 million ants and termites per year. The figures can go a bit higher and a bit lower, but on average, that's how many they consume. And a lot of these species are actually harvesting species. So they're eating organic matter that could be food for other things. So in an ecosystem without pangolins, some of these species that become pests could get out of control. And, in areas like where I am in Africa, we've got communities, people doing farming, we've got wildlife. And so it's very important, especially in Namibia, that there's a lot of food out there for these animals, because we're in an area where we just went through quite a severe drought in 2019. And in those years, the pangolin in the ecosystem, you know, kept ants and termites under control. There was an estimation done that having a healthy population of pangolin in an area could be enough food for about 30 cows per year or 430 springbok.
I mean, I didn't know that, so I mean, it's wonderful to know all these things. So, and now, of course, because you mentioned about, you know, all the details about why pangolins are important. But then, for our audience here, why do you think pangolins are particularly important to us as human beings? Why do you think that we depend on pangolins in general, for example?
Well, I think, you know, every animal in an ecosystem and in the world is important to us. And it's always, you know, good to protect what we have. Like I said, the only reason they're threatened is because of us, and that's why they should actually be important and a priority for us to protect them, because if we don't, they will go extinct.
I mean, very much true, because we have already lost the Galapagos tortoise, for example, on St. George. We are losing the northern white rhino, and we have lost many species due to human beings. And Kelsey, I want to ask you, working with pangolins for so many years, how has the fact that they are, of course, the most trafficked animal on earth impacted you personally?
Well, I think, you know, it has a huge impact because it's shaped everything I do, and it shapes every aspect of my job. If they weren't so trafficked, I would just be working probably, you know, in ecological research, and maybe would have taken a different path. But my master's thesis was developed around the fact that we're confiscating live pangolins every year. And so the theme of this thesis was to look at what can we do to better, to improve survival of trafficked pangolins that get released. And having said that, I've worked in every aspect of conservation of pangolins because the fact that they're trafficked. Training law enforcement and rangers for the government in how to handle them because they're confiscating them. We have to do awareness because, as you said, so many people still don't even know what they are. How can you even begin to protect a species that probably more than half of the world doesn't even know exists? And there's just so many different factors, but a lot of the work that I do revolves around the fact that they're so highly trafficked, and we need to urgently gain a better understanding of their population, their ecology, as well as improving survival rates in the wild.
Now, Kelsey, of course, you mentioned about your work and your organization, PCRF, and I was going to ask you, well, how does it work? For example, if you want to conserve a pangolin, do you have a let's say a conservation area, or do you go to the wildlife trafficking centers or the poachers and get those live pangolins and rehabilitate them, for example?
Yeah, that's a good question. I do a lot of different things. So one aspect is working with the live confiscated pangolins in collaboration with the local government and police and other stakeholders. And after that pangolin is confiscated, it needs to be seen by a veterinarian, rehabilitated, and released. And so after the animal has been rehabilitated, we release it with satellite and VHF transmitters to watch its movement and understand the survival, and if there's any issues, we can intervene. Those animals get released into national parks as well as private land of any kind, nature reserves, farms. A big problem across southern Africa is actually livestock farming, small livestock farming with electrical fencing, as well as high value game farming with electrical fencing. It kills an alarming number of pangolins every year. It's believed in South Africa, the electric fencing is killing more pangolins per year than poaching. And so outside of that project that I do with the post-release monitoring, I work in communities where pangolins exist. And so I employ pangolin rangers to offer sustainable livelihoods for these rangers. And they also act as kind of like a research assistant. So they collect data on the animals, they monitor them, but they're also protecting them. So that's kind of to give you an idea. We work in any kind of area where there are pangolin existing. And so not only do we offer the protection, we're doing research to gain a better understanding of their ecology, as I mentioned. We also look at genetics and population density and things like that. And everything we do research-wise is for the bigger picture of being able to make guidelines and informed decisions.
I mean, that's amazing, because like, I mean, right there, everyone must understand that you have got the most amazing yet the most important job in the natural world. I mean, in conservation, I think I've got the most important job, because the northern white rhino is an animal which we know very well. But you are working with an animal which many people don't even know it exists. And people see their pictures, they think it's a mythical creature. But you're working on saving them, the most trafficked animal. And this brings us to the question, Kelsey, what are the threats faced by pangolins today? Because I mean, I've heard people use them for medicines and all these things, but what is the main threat that it's faced by them today?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on one of the threats there, but the main threat to pangolins is actually poaching for traditional medicine, but not just any traditional medicine, traditional Chinese medicine. They're also eaten as a delicacy. So the big threat comes from, Asian markets, because there are 4 species occurring in Asia, and they are basically critically endangered. 2 are critically endangered, 2 are endangered. They've basically been poached out. Now these markets are, seeking to fill those gaps where they can't get pangolins anymore, so they're turning to Africa. In Africa, traditionally, they've also been used in medicine, for spiritual beliefs. In Namibia, we've got a huge number of tribes. They all have a different belief. Some protect them, some don't. But it's never been a threat to where we were worried about populations decreasing. But now there's this international market and trade. That's the #1 threat. As I mentioned, in Southern Africa, we also have this very big problem with electrical fencing. A study done in South Africa found that for every 11 kilometers of electric fence, 1 pangolin dies. And this goes for all small mammals. And there's a lot of additional factors. There hasn't been much research even on the threats. We know that climate change is impacting them. My original study site received half the annual rainfall in 2019, and I had 50% of the research pangolins die. So that was a huge impact. They also sometimes, habitat encroachment is a huge thing. And changing habitat, changing land use. As more people encroach into these natural areas, which might have been otherwise absent of people, it brings into this kind of, you could say almost conflict, where pangolins are now in an area where there's people because people intruded in that area, or now there's a road or even a fence that changes the way these animals move. So changing habitats and encroachment on their habitat is also a major threat.
Sadly we don't know much about the pangolins, but we know that due to our actions they're going on a very fast decline, and so is the whole of the natural world. So Kelsey, of every animal on earth, every single creature on earth, there is some misconceptions. So what is one misconception you have seen, or misconception that you have heard of about pangolins?
Well, I think the biggest misconception in general is when people are believing that it can be used for medicine or any sort of spiritual belief. Their scales are made out of keratin, just like our fingernails. There is no medicinal value to that. You might as well chew your nails off than kill a pangolin. And I would say, in my opinion, that's the biggest misconception that is out there. And it goes for all of the illegal wildlife trade, in believing that these animal parts have some, actual merit and value in medicine.
Of course, very much, because there are pictures online that show this whole stack of pangolins without their scales. So is it only the scales that are used, or are other parts of the pangolin used as well?
It depends where you are, but generally, even in Asia, they will use different parts for different things. As I mentioned, their meat in Asia is eaten as a delicacy, and there's different things, like a fetus is considered to have different healing properties than the scales. Same with the tongue and the claws. So, there's every piece of the pangolin almost basically could have some sort of use. There's even evidence that people believe the blood has a special value. The list goes on, and really it's just a big misconception.
I mean, that's very much scary indeed. I mean, it is sad that we are losing them for something which is not true. And now we get to the one of the most fun questions. Kelsey, of course, you have been working with pangolins. So one part of the question is, do you always wanted to become a pangolin expert or not? And the second part of the question is, what is some fun experience you had with pangolins? Why are they important, and why do you think they must be saved?
Okay, yeah. So I didn't always want to work with pangolins, as I mentioned before. I knew that I always wanted to do something where I could make a difference for animals and wildlife. I was originally on track to become a veterinarian for wildlife, but I started getting involved with species survival planning and conservation at a bigger level, and decided that I'd rather put my time into something that I can actually make a difference for the species. And I want to do it in a place where it's really needed. I want to do it on the ground. And so that's kind of what brought me to Africa, and that's really what drew me to pangolin is, if I'm dedicating my, career and life to this, because you have to make a lot of sacrifices in conservation, I wanted to be making a difference, and I want to be helping endangered species. And so that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question, I could say that, every day is a special experience with these animals. So few people have the privilege to get to observe them. And I feel like it is such a privilege. I've had, I think, some of the best moments include, as you can see the picture behind me, seeing a mom and a pup. I've been fortunate enough to see it quite a bit, but there's one moment that really stands out to me. It was early on when I started the research project, and I knew nothing, really about their behavior at all. And I found this female. She'd been missing from the place I used to know her to be in, so I was a bit worried about her because we didn't know much about her range. And she was curled up with blood on her back. So I was absolutely worried, like, what is wrong with her? Why is there blood? But I'm not going to interfere. I'm going to let her uncurl and just see what she does, because the whole part of the research is to really understand. It's in a natural setting. It wasn't human inflicted, so let me see what happens. And she actually uncurled. And very slowly, this little head popped out from behind her back. And that blood on her back was actually from the umbilical cord. So this was a newborn pup, which is very special, because usually they hide their newborn pups away, and they're very hard to observe until about 2 months old. They only get moved. And then the moment got even more special, because she was about 10, 15 meters in front of me, and she was headed that direction. And for whatever reason, she suddenly turned completely around and actually walked over my feet with this baby. And that was very special, because they are very good at smelling, and she knew that I was there. There's no way that she didn't know of my presence, because they have such a good sense of smell. And just about another 15 meters on, she stopped and let it off her back and let it nurse. And so that was quite special, because they are quite shy animals. And I actually had another female do it shortly after that. And so the first female I mentioned, she was very used to my presence because I would collect foraging samples from her. But the other female, if she heard my car, she'd be in a burrow. And she actually did something very similar. She was walking away from me, and she made a complete turnaround and actually walked over my feet with her baby. And it actually got knocked off the bush. She went under, and she patiently waited and let it climb back on. I would definitely say like those are some of the most special moments I've had.
I mean, that's indeed one of the greatest moments, because I can imagine it very much clearly. Because, I mean, I also have had some unexpected wildlife experiences. I mean, it is pretty astonishing, because like working with nature or working with science or working with wildlife, every day is something new. I mean, you may think of you knowing an animal or a place very, very well, but there is something unexpected that can happen. So you spoke, of course, about the pangolin's baby. So have you got any footage or any videos of the pangolin and its infant?
Yeah, I do have footage of the baby. So baby's actually right on their mom's back. So I'm trying to move here. So you can actually see they kind of hold on with their tails. So I do have footage where the baby's climbing on the mom's back, riding on the mom's back. In this particular photo, that baby is about 1 month old. And yeah, I've been lucky to see them from this small age all the way up to 4 or 5 months. Sometimes they still try and climb on mom's back when they're already over half of her body weight. So we do have lots of amazing footage. Like I said, it's just such a privilege to get to, you know, work with these animals, help them, and research them.
I mean that's beautiful indeed. So Kelsey, in the wild, apart from human beings, how is, let's say, pangolins' behavior? Do they have predators? Are they strong animals? Can they defend themselves or not?
Yeah, so they do have some natural predators, but they are so strong that they very often they can survive an attempt. So a fully grown, healthy adult can lock into such a tight ball that not even like a lion or hyena can do anything to it. And there are videos out there from people on safari where lions have played with a pangolin for about 10 hours and they just give up. Usually they give up much sooner. Having said that, they can still predate them, but most predators get bored. I've seen every once in a while a scale get ripped off, but you know, they actually have very, very sharp claws, like razor blades. So when that predator is doing that, they actually can thrash their body and they can like slice open the nose of that predator. And so they actually can be quite defensive, but having said that, the young are quite vulnerable. Until after, you know, maybe a year and a half or so, they can be quite vulnerable because their scales are still developing, they're still small. They've also been seen to be predated by crocodiles. But like I said, generally speaking, they survive quite well as a healthy adult. We are the main threat and we are the main reason for their decline.
I mean, that's true and sad. I mean, the natural world has been lost drastically over the many years of our existence on Earth. And I mean, each and every single one of us, when considered saving these creatures, has got an impact to make. No matter if I live in UAE or different parts of the world, we all, have our impact on all these animals. So Kelsey, one of our most important part of the podcast is when we ask our guest speakers to put their expertise into practice on what they think is the best possible way, let's say, ways that individuals such as myself or younger people can engage in saving pangolins and all life on Earth.
So when it comes to pangolins specifically, one of the most important things people can do is to share. As we talked earlier, there's still a huge number of people that don't know what a pangolin is. Every week in this country, when I talk about it, people say, "What? We have that here? What is that?" And so it's very important to share posts, to share videos, raise awareness, because like I said earlier, you can't protect an animal if you don't even know what it is. So I think, that's one of the biggest things, raising awareness and education on the subject. You can't save a species that you don't know exists. But on a larger scale, the only way that we can save our wildlife, as I mentioned, climate change is a threat to pangolins, but not only pangolins. A lot of these insectivorous species that are living in these areas are highly threatened by climate change due to droughts and other natural disasters. So one of the most important things is sustainability across all aspects of life, but not just over the top, but reducing and reusing and recycling, but don't do it for a week. You have to do it your whole life. Live a sustainable life. And I think in the long term, that's going to be the only way we can save all nature on this planet, is that we can all reduce our footprint and do what we can to spread awareness and education on these things. And in the end, that's the best that we can do as individuals. Because the more of us that can live in a way that's more sustainable, the bigger impact that we can all have together.
That's, of course, one of the best solutions that can be done by all of us. And of course, before we reach the end of our podcast, it is very important to save these creatures, and all of us has a great impact on how we can do so. So Kelsey, what is your number one message to the world on pangolins, and what's your number one message to the entire world, we can say?
My number one message is that we all need to work together to save pangolins. Like I said, spread awareness, share any kind of posts and education that you can, because the more people that know what they are and that they even exist, the more people that can start putting their minds together to help them.
Thank you so much, Kelsey. Of course, I learned a lot from this session myself. And as you said, awareness is key to everything, because until we don't understand how something, let's say how pangolins, how nature functions, we cannot have that curiosity, we cannot have that mindset of saving them. And until we cannot understand to save them, we cannot save the planet naturally itself. So thank you so much for joining me today. And it was great speaking to you, and looking forward to more collaboration in the future. Thank you so much to your team and yourself for whatever you do for pangolins and in the natural world.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This is already a great start to raising more awareness for pangolins. So
Thank you so much.
I mean, I've always been interested in nature.
Kind of Mother Nature's perfect animal,
Seeing Nile crocodiles and being kind of terrified.
Welcome to the Nature Talks podcast.